Good morning, Hollywood. Also, you here in Redwood City. Great to be back and doing a tasting. I know we got to do this in a bit of a hurry. We've got 25 wines here. I didn't number them. I figured people get nervous if we did. But anyway, so the first wine is the Almondo Arnese. We have two from Almondo. The more famous one, the Bricco di Ciliegi, the Ridge of the Cherries, and this one, Vigne Sparse. I had them both recently, and the Ciliegi is always a better wine, but it's all shook up right now, and it really wasn't tasting very good. So when I tasted this wine is just singing at the moment. So anyway, Sparse, as you read in the notes, means it comes from three different vineyards in different areas, so scattered vineyards. But wonderful aromatics in this, really well balanced. I find Arnese a lot, sometimes just a bit fat, lacking in direction, but this wine has real drive, freshness. Just a little more depth, I'd have to say, than what I get in most Arnese. And in general, sorry, John, I am not a fan of Arnese. I find them too often lacking. The best are good, but in general, as a category, not really thrilling. So from Piedmont, we're going to Liguria. Liguria is the coastal area, if you know the Italian map, like where Genoa is, and you're on your way to France. That's where this wine comes from, 40 miles from the border. It's a really interesting place when you're driving. If you drive from the border of France all the way to Tuscany, I think you go through like 130 tunnels because it's this very narrow strip along the sea. It's just mountains coming straight down. So all of these are
So we're doing Vermentino, right?
Vermentino.
We jumped over there prima.
Oh, sorry. Okay, we'll do the Vermentino. Colpa mia. Anyway, I saw that bottle. You down there, do the Grimaldi first. Anyway, but wonderful aromatics. Vermentino comes predominantly from Sardinia, Tuscan coast, but I find these just have a little more intrigue and character, a little more spice in the nose. Those that are in Tuscany and Sardinia have a tendency to get just maybe a little riper. This one's a little more focused, brighter. And they've always talked about Vermentino, saying that it needs a little kiss of the sea, so you have to be close to the coast. Really, really spicy. Okay, so the next wine is a new wine for us. Never been imported before, the Tenuta Grimaldi. This is from Matelica, the valley in the Marche, the only north-south valley in all of the Apennines. And what that does, it makes this a particularly different climatic zone, because most of the Verdicchio that's grown in the Marche is on the coast. It's decidedly warmer. They start harvesting in August. Here, because you're upland inland, you get very cool nights, warm days. They don't start until the end of September and the beginning of October. This is on the east side, the same as like Colle Stefano, whereas like the Monachesca and Bisci are on the west side. They're a little riper because they get the afternoon sun. This gets the morning sun, so it's a little fresher, cleaner, brighter. Well, Verdicchio in general usually has good acidity, and even remarkably when you're on the coast, when they're harvesting in August, it still has good acidity. And those are like at sea level. Here you're over 1,500 feet. very cool evenings all the time. It gets down into the 50s. It's like, living here every night. Where you're on the coast, you hope that it gets below 70 at night, which usually isn't. So this next wine, new producer, I had never heard of before, just newly imported, Antonella Lombardo. This comes from Calabria. Calabria, is the boot. Looks like it's kicking the Sicily football. And this is on the other side, the Ionian side. So if you think of the foot that's kicking it, it's right under the big toe. It's on the back side of that. But this is made from generally an aromatic grape that the Malvasia della Lipari is a dessert wine. But in this area, they call it Greco, from the town of Bianco. So that's why they call it Greco Bianco. But wow, I found this wine just exciting. The nose is so seductive, intriguing, so much going on there, and then texturally it has a whole different character. She also makes another one called Autoritratto, which means self-portrait, that sees a little skin contact. That's a wine you really need to sort of decant ahead of time, let it open up. I had a bottle over the course of a week, and then finally the last 3-4 days it was like, okay, it's finally ready to go. But this is one of the most exciting new wines I've seen in some time.
No relations to Greco di Tufo, right? No mistake though.
One of the major problems we see in Italy is the name is like Trebbiano. Trebbiano is a family of names, not of grapes. So there's 6 decidedly different types of Trebbiano that are genetically completely different, have nothing to do with each other than they say Trebbiano on the label. So we have now 3 wines from Lis Neris. Lis Neris, very, very good producer from Isonzo, one of the 3 major DOCs in Friuli. This all comes from basically flatland. It's in the Isonzo River Plain, not far from Blazon, our producer. But this is a wine that I thought, wow, Chardonnay, you all know how much I love, selling Chardonnay or drinking it, but I figured there's no reason why we shouldn't have something at that same price point of quality California or French Chardonnay. And I thought this wine really showed that. And the one thing that it doesn't show for me is I'm an anti-wood guy. I hate to see wood as a flavor. And here you get a lot of texture, character, creaminess, but it's not like it's woody. But I think that you could give that to anyone in California that really show them what a Chardonnay would be like from Friuli. However, this wine, did you see that?
Oh.
I hope you in LA didn't see that, but
It happens.
yeah, it happens. So the next wine is, because it's very, very common in Friuli to have blends of grapes. So this is a blend of, I'm gonna look bad here, Pinot Grigio, Chardonnay, and Sauvignon. Not the classic particular blend, but that is this blend. But it's very, very popular there. The only thing that makes it a little more difficult for us to try and sell, one of our most popular wines, however, is the Terlaner, which is a 3-grape blend as well, and we don't seem to have any issue with that. This is a different price point, but once again, these are bigger, richer, all tonneau fermented and aged wine. I think these wines may be just a little cool. this cup filled up in a hurry. And then the third of this series is the Confini. The Confini means borders because Friuli is truly right up against the Slovenian border, all of the wine growing regions. So this is when you throw Riesling and Gewürz into any kind of blend, most people are beginning to say, wow, that is sort of gonna be desserty over the top. And although this wine has some aromatic character to it, it still shows so much intrigue and depth. And if you were to have this with more, I don't want to go the generic stereotype, but I will, Asian cuisine, I think that this is the kind of wine that's gonna go with those spicier flavors. Although in Friuli, you don't see many Asian restaurants. And I am more or less a hater of Gewürztraminer, but just a little touch in the background does give it a little different texture and different aromatic structure as well. Move that out of the way so I can slide it down next time. So now 3 rosés, some very different kind of styles. The first wine is from Montegrossi. I would say most of you are familiar with it, but we have so many new faces, maybe not. But we've been selling this wine for a long time. We used to import them. And the first year that they made a rosé, it was a Saignée. Saignée is basically when you're making your red wine, and this used to be a Saignée of the San Marcellino, their biggest, most powerful Chianti. What happens when you draw the juice off of that, you draw the juice out of a big, powerful red wine, and what you get is a big, powerful rosé. Too heavy, too rich, too alcoholic. So now they don't do that anymore. They harvest grapes specifically just to be made into the rosé. And what you get is a fresher, brighter, cleaner kind of wine. But beautiful aromatics. And this comes from the heart of Chianti Classico in Gaiole. If you would look at the soil there, you would not think there was any dirt. It's like rocks everywhere. It is a very difficult place to be trying to farm. So the next wine is from Barolo. This is a Saignée. So you're going to get but it's a Saignée of the Nebbiolo, not one of their Barolos. So it's not going to be quite as big and powerful. By the way, Salosso in Italian, but Saignée is French. Means to bleed. But beautiful aromatic, so clean and crisp. The Vairas are just marvelous people. By the way, when you see that name, the V-A-J, in Italy there are 3 I's. I, as we would normally think of as I. The J is pronounced just like I, but it's called E because in Italian the I is pronounced E. E lunga, the long I. And then there's the Y, which is the Greek Y, Y. But they all have exactly the same sound. And now those are sort of the Y and the I lunga are more historical usages. They don't actually use them anymore. But if you see them, they're always pronounced just like an I. But it's not Vajra, which I've heard more often than not.
So good. Every year.
But I think you can see in this wine that Saignée gives it just a little more you know, muffin top, you know, it's got a little more richness going on.
But it doesn't feel heavy, the acid.
Well, it has marvelous acid, but at the same time, it's got a little jiggle to it, you know. So the next one is from Alto Piemonte, so up against the Swiss border. And this is where they make Gattinara, Gemme, Sizzano, a whole slew of odd DOCs that until a decade ago, everyone had forgotten because no one made any of those. But this is a beautiful wine. It's 10% Vespolina. This area also traditionally is always blended grapes. It's rare you find 100% Nebbiolo, unlike in the Langhe and Barolo Barbaresco, they're all 100%. But really fresh, really expressive kind of aromatics.
So pretty.
Of the three, I think it's the most complete wine. You got length, depth, richness, flavor profile. Just a super bottle of wine. Unfortunately, they don't make much, and we bought a big chunk, and that more than likely will be all we're going to get for the rest of the year. So when customers say, oh, I would like that, refer them to, yeah, buy it now because it won't be around. So the next wine is a new winery for us. This comes from Monferrato, not an area that everyone is familiar with. It's east of Barolo Barbaresco, near the town of Asti, and this is Monferrato Rosso because Asti is Barbera country, and you're not allowed to use Nebbiolo on the label because they don't want to be confused with their neighbors to the west. This is a unique wine, spends time in amphora, so you get a different texture, flavor profile. It really doesn't taste anything like, for me anyway, Nebbiolo from the Langhe, but really intriguing flavors, texture, a little more supple, sultry kind of feel to it.
Kind of gamey. Pseudo gaminess to it.
But I think that the amphora gives it a different textural kind of feel to it.
That's cool.
It's really cool.
Yeah, but that's, I really felt that for anyone who's, you know, into Nebbiolo, you should see all the expressions of what it's like because it's just not about the Langhe. And of course, well, perhaps not all of you once again know that Nebbiolo, you should always be using a Burgundy glass, right, broad or rounder, as the same you should for Etna, Norello Mascalese. So this is a new producer as well, Emiliano Falzini, super guy, Tuscan, consulting winemaker, and he's actually the consulting winemaker for Antonella Lombardo, the Pai Greco. By the way, I was in the notes, but the Pai Greco is not P, even though it's P-I, it's Pai Greco because it's the Greek pronunciation. But anyway, this is property he bought in Sicily on Etna, on the north side near Randazzo. Very high up, a mixture of old vines. The intriguing thing about Etna is that there's been vineyards there forever and a day. It's just nobody was making wine other than the local guys making garage wine. So when you buy a vineyard, you get vineyards that are 100 years old, 50 years old. It's not like it's a new planting of a bunch of stuff. So when you get old vines like that, it really gives you an opportunity to make something, wow, more expressive, less fruity, you know. And here in California, we have more often than not wines that lean more towards fruity rather than more earth or savory notes. I really like that wine. I think it's really interesting, and it gives a different face to the other people that are there, like Gracchi or Benanti, or this is a whole different flavor profile. It's more along the lines of the Cacciornia, but oddly enough, both of those wines are made from Tuscan consulting enologists who bought property there. Anyway, so apologize, the rest of the wines are Sangiovese. Only because we had the boat come in, and as I have expressed to our dear fearless leader, Clyde, hello Clyde, that we need more Italian tastings, and more varieties, more regions. But I cannot show it. Bordeaux all taste the same. Doesn't really matter. So, whoa, shaking your boots, buddy. And they're all made from the same damn grapes. I mean, how hard is that? Yeah. So this is a wine that I really like. Vigna Maggio, a historical winery in Chianti Classico in Greve. The Mona Lisa, she was from Vigna Maggio. So it goes way back to that time, but they don't have any current distribution in California. So I was offered distribution, and I said, tell you what, and I tasted all the other wines very excitedly. And I didn't like any of the other wines other than this one. This one tastes just pure classic Chianti, just what I would, you know, archetypal variety, flavor profile, especially from Greve. Wow, pure. But anyway, the palette that I got, which, how many cases are in a palette? 56? Yeah. 70 for this one. So we had a little more. They said a pallet, and I said yeah, and then all of a sudden it was 70 cases. But anyway, super bottle of wine. We have a lot of it. It should be everyone's go-to concept. And if you mention the Mona Lisa, that always helps. The other thing, there was a...
Print the picture of Mona Lisa, put it on the top of the stack.
There you go. The Kenneth Branagh film, Shakespeare, was it Midsummer's Night's Dream, that had Denzel in it. It was filmed at Vigna Maggio. And I remember them telling me that they were filming, and all of a sudden, because they're out in the wild, it seems like you're in the 1400s, except on the far hillside, there was a guy driving his tractor. They had to shut down the filming, then some guy drive over there and they say, you know, you could have said, no, I'm working out here, you know? Wouldn't do it. Finally, it cost him like $5,000 to have the guy go in the rest of the day. He knew he had him over a barrel. Anyway, so Isole Olena, one of the classic Chianti producers. Chianti Classico runs from Florence to Siena, and it's sort of an oblong like this. They are on the midwestern portion in Barbarino Valdelsa. Super quality wines always. This is a blend of grapes, you can see. Probably the only Chianti producer that uses Syrah as a portion of what they blend on a regular, and have been for some time.
That's true.
But they also make a 100% Syrah as well. However, they've recently sold, which sometimes means good things, sometimes means bad things. But they sold to a French company, some big insurance guys who just bought Biondi Santi, and they also run Charles Heidzier. And I met with the guy here, had lunch with him, and then I went and visited Biondi Santi, and I said, I feel comfortable with these guys moving forward. because they really are, we only want to do the best. They're not cutting back, they got money to throw away, so the quality of this wine is never going to go down. Also 2019 Super Vintage. You can see it has a little more of that mid-palate weight and sweetness. That is just the vintage. Okay, this next wine, the Selvapiana, has always been one of my favorite wines. That is pronounced Bucerchiale. So just think of like a ghost, a boo, a chair, and chiale. So Bucerchiale. But this is from Chianti Rufina. Chianti Rufina, this tiny little zone. I think there are like 14 wineries in it all told. Just to the southeast of Florence, you know, maybe like 8-10 miles away or so. Maybe not even that much. But this wine has always had spice and intrigue. They only make it in what they feel are quality vintages. Wow. Just absolutely stunning flavor. I like to talk about flavor specifically with these wines like facets. Here in California, more often we talk about smooth, round, and you get this kind of lustrous pearl kind of feel. Here, this is like a diamond. It's all a bunch of little tiny cut faces. So many different flavors happening at one time, but depth, character, flavor. Wow, that wine is dynamite. Okay, so now to Montalcino, because our boat has come in. I tried to figure out how to put these, this one bigger, smaller, and I said, okay, no, we're just going to do it by winery. Each winery, Rosso and Brunello, or whatever else they have. Otherwise, it would just be distracting. And I think you get more idea of what the winery is about if you taste all of the wines from the same winery together, rather than splashed around in a bunch of difficult things. Also, just from a mere memory portion, it's always easier to remember the progression this way. So Albatretti, a really new winery. They started producing in '07. Guido and I were at a tasting in Montalcino. We tasted the 2010 Brunello. Because we were doing a huge tasting. There's 170 wineries we were doing. And we both tasted it and we looked at each other. It's like, never heard of this guy. This is freaking tremendous. So I didn't trust we got the right wine. So I had our sommelier come back, re-pour us. It was the same wine, and okay. And on the other side of the building where we were, they had all the producers. So we go down alphabetically to find this guy. And here's a guy, he stands about like yay high. And he's bald, except he's got a white beard down to about here. Big, round belly. He looks like freaking Santa Claus. I mean, it's like, wow. Babbo Natale in Italian. Wonderful guy. He owns the, what's called Elettrodomestici, so a big box appliance store in the closest little town to Montalcino. So he sells refrigerators and TVs and all this. And this is his side job when he's sort of pseudo-retired. The vineyard had been in his family forever. It's just outside of Montalcino, sort of southwesterly, right next to Palazzone. And he sort of spent a year and a half cutting back all the crap that had overgrown the vineyard, but the vines were still there and solid. But he makes very, very little wine. It's just a hobby. He's still working. In fact, when I was there 4 years ago, leaving my hotel in the morning, I look up and there he is, and he's got a hand truck with a washing machine on it. He's delivering to somebody.
Nice.
He's still working at the other place. But anyway, super spice, intrigue, wonderful, expressive. That wine's just dynamite. After the first time I met him with the beard down to his waist, the next time I saw him, it was right here. And I said, you know, what happened with the beard, Gaetano? And he said, well, he lives down this long staircase right in the center of Montalcino. Montalcino sits high up on the hill. It's windy as crap. And he said he's walking down there in the dark, and the wind comes up and takes his beard and goes alien all over his face. And he almost falls down because he can't see at all. So he said, I had to trim it. You know, that was the end of the story. But it has grown back. So I don't know if he's wearing a strap or a bandana when he walks down his staircase, but nonetheless. So we also have the 2015 vintage. He's a little slow in getting things out. As I love to say, I said to him, so were we your first client? And he said, well, actually no, but you were the first one to pay.
Oh,
So I count that as a yes, we were the first paying client. But his 2016 Brunello, you can see he doesn't make very much wine. He has a tiny little winery, and we've all been to wineries before. This looks like a garage, and where you've got crud stacked everywhere. You know, he doesn't have enough room really, but he doesn't have a big enough production to be able to warrant having a real live winery. So, nonetheless. Okay, so San Polino, not to be confused with San Polo, which it's right next to, oddly enough. They are in the southeastern corner of Montalcino, just down the road from where Fattoria de Barbi is, one of the more historical wineries in Montalcino, just a little farther away from where Biondisanti is. But this was started by a very intriguing couple, Katia and Gigi. Gigi is Italian from Pordenone in Friuli. He's a biologist by trade. Katia is a self-professed hippie from England. Somehow or another they got together, and they are ultra biodynamic, and although they don't use Demeter because they don't believe in the owner's original, or the original guy, I forget what his name is, Steiner. He had a lot of racial theories that were not wonderful if you were Jewish, and she's Jewish, and hence, you know, no, we're not going to use that guy. But anyway, beautiful property. I actually sent my son to live with them for 6 months, and he worked there. They are part of WOOF, which is the Worldwide Organization of Organic Farms, and they operate as like a kibbutz. So if you want to come and work for a week or whatever, they give you, you know, food and lodging, and you go out and work in the vineyard. However, as my son learned, work is work there. It's not like what you normal. When the sun's up, you're out. When the sun's down, you come back just for dinner, and then you go back to work. It's really good if you have children and you want to get them to understand what work is like. Wow. Anyway, beautiful wines, really intriguing aromatics. We have on and off imported their wines. We are now back importing their wines. One of their big issues with us was our prices were always too low. And the people who were selling in Montalcino couldn't sell to American tourists because Christ, K&L's got it cheaper. So I've had to raise our prices a little bit. Makes it good for you if you want to buy it. But anyway, also just a comment on pricing. Everything is more expensive now. For a producer, labels cost more. You can't even get a label because there's no paper to print it on in Italy. You can't get a capsule, you can't get a cork, you can't get cardboard for your boxes. And then we have all the shipping things. Shipping costs have tripled from what they used to cost. So the world is in a disaster shape of economy at the moment. But nonetheless, we're standing here drinking wine.
Yep.
Could be worse.
Yes.
Now, I'm not sure how much all of you read all of the reviewers out there, but 2017, according to all of these weathermen, and I don't say reviewers, I say weathermen because that's all they write about. 2017 is a terrible year, just way too hot, whatever. And I think it just tasted of 2017. If they're saying that this is too hot, they've never been to Paso Robles. That's hot, and there you get wines that don't have acidity, balance. This wine is not cooked, it's not heavy, it's beautiful, fragrant, aromatic. If anything, that vintage made it easier to drink at a younger stage. But to say that at some blanket statement across the board that the wines were no good is ludicrous. But as we all know, every person who's a writer out there needs a tagline and needs to be able to say something. So 2017, especially if you read Monica Larner, she is the chief weather person for Robert Parker. That's about half about what she writes about is the weather conditions. Doesn't really matter, just talk about the freaking wine, you know? Anyway, this is their single vineyard version, Helichrysum. I had to ask, what the hell is Helichrysum? Anyway, it's some sort of plant that grows around their winery. Some of you may have known that, but me, no. So this wine from a vineyard decidedly higher, has also a slightly different winemaking track. Spends a little time in barrique just to give it a little extra zip and structure, so you can see the difference between the two. This wine, there's a little bit of residual tannin, not astringent or bitter, but it's kind of that super fine grain that you can feel on your teeth. Oh, it's there, all right, but not in an obtrusive way at all. I love those wines. So, this is not a winery we bring in, but when you buy gray market, sometimes you got to play a game with the local people to buy their wine. Otherwise, everybody gets nasty and threatens lawsuits and stuff, which would never hold a candle, but nobody wants to have to talk with a lawyer ever. So occasionally we buy both and balance out the price. So this is Le Potazzine. Le Potazzine, if you look at the label, it has these two little birds. Those are Potazzine. And the reason it is that is because the woman who owns this now and her ex-husband, who ran off with the au pair, It happens.
Tale as old as time.
Yeah. The grandmother of the kids, because they had twin girls, and she said, "Oh my God, they look like little Potazzini." So, leaving what the husbands had named the winery to what the wife had taken over, she said, "No, we're going to call it Potazzine, and you take the au pair and go wherever you like." But anyway, really interesting wine. They are sort of from Montalcino west, still very high up, but they're like about 3-4 miles away from downtown Montalcino, but still on this kind of high plain. Real traditional sort of winemaking. Thank you very much. Hello, mon frère Jacques. I love Jacques. He's a great guy. But there's a real purity in those wines. Just super elegant. And they have also, everyone in, well, most everywhere in Italy has raised their prices. In Montalcino, all of the land is controlled. So there is a 10 square mile area, basically. And if Lilia and I were to go there and say, okay, we're buying these 10 acres and we're gonna plant Sangiovese, grow Brunellos, no, you can't do that. First off, you can't even plant vines because there's a moratorium in the EU. 2 minutes, and I'll tell that story for everyone later. How's that? Okay, Potazzine. Wow, another wine from the terrible 2017 vintage. Okay, Poggioreale, our direct import for many years now. This is their Rosso. They are in the north end of Montalcino. They almost at the border, across the street from Altazino, but on a really wonderful piece of property. It's an old couple who are making wine. They're in their mid-80s now. I don't know what's going to go on, but
Kids to continue? Do we have children to take over?
they have one daughter who is not a winemaker. She can spell wine, but not much else. So I don't know. You have to hire consulting enologists and winemakers and all of the other issues. But they make a wine that generally has a real bold, rich, spicy kind of feel to it. They are highly sought after grapes because they sell grapes to other wineries. And everybody knows they have really good grapes. It's just when you're 84, it's difficult to say, yeah, let's go and do more of this because it's all about the vineyard work. That's the real key. And in the winery, just walking around at 84 is not simple. Anyway, 2016, you all know, great vintage. Poggioreale, all made in 20 hectoliter barrels. They're small production. They make about 500 cases of Brunello a year. And actually, this is the first time I've ever tasted the Reserva. Somehow or another, it wasn't quite ready when I was there in April. So I said, well, when it finally got here, we'll taste it. sometimes, hey, Will, sometimes in Reserva making in Italy, you get people who just take the same grapes and try and make them harder. This is a different selection, but wow, you can see this one's got amped up fruit depth.
More dimension.
It's a whole different weight class than what the previous one was. Well, thank you all. I know everybody's got to run off. Sayonara, Hollywood.